There's a sound you never forget. Not the slam of a door or the click of heels on tile. I'm talking about the sound of a decision. It was 7:12 a.m. on a Tuesday, overcast sky. Our coffee maker was wheezing like it always did when it needed a cleaning. And there she was, standing by the pantry, holding her travel mug like it was a microphone for a performance I didn't realize I was in. "Julian," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I'm staying with Caleb for now. I'll come back later." She didn't say Caleb, our neighbor. She didn't say Caleb, the guy who fixes sprinklers and looks at me too long when you're not home. She didn't say sorry. She sipped her coffee, burned her lip, wiped it with the sleeve of my college hoodie. Then she added, "This little thing can't ruin us." Little thing. Like she forgot this little thing was her telling me she's walking out on a 15-year marriage because she's inspired by someone who owns a truck full of lawn chemicals and thinks Bedoit is a chocolate. You might be thinking this is where I screamed or begged or punched a wall. I didn't do any of that. I looked at the bowl of cereal I'd poured, soggy now the way everything felt lately, and I said, "Okay." I think that scared her more than if I'd thrown a chair. She waited like she expected me to give her permission, or stop her, or remind her of our vows. But I just stood, walked to the window, and watched her reflection walk toward the door. Before she left, she said one more thing, like she couldn't help herself. "Don't be dramatic. This is just space. We're fine." Then the door closed, and the sound of her decision echoed. Deep, silent, irreversible. Let me rewind just a bit. My name's Julian. I'm 41. I work as a freelance layout designer for textbooks no one reads until midterms. Our home is in Collier, Missouri. Not exactly a hotbed of scandal, but here I am, right? My wife's name is Serena. Yes, with an S. Her mother thought it sounded more literary. She's a yoga instructor turned life coach. Says she helps women rediscover their feminine power through retreats, essential oils, and text messages like, "Drink water and destroy your doubts. Today, sweat droplets. Dizzy. I loved her once. No, I still love her. And that's the worst part. Because that morning, when she walked out with her perfectly packed bag and expensive stainless steel water bottle, I realized she had rehearsed that moment, practiced it, probably in front of a mirror, probably with Caleb watching from her phone. And I, her loyal, quiet husband who alphabetizes the spice rack, was just one of the props in her new, authentic life. So what did I do? I didn't follow her. I didn't call her. I didn't change the locks. But I did start changing something else. I made a folder. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Inside it, I saved screenshots of her coaching client Zoom sessions at 11 p.m. when she thought I was asleep. A strange Venmo payment labeled, "Sweat and Spark," for $670. An email from Caleb's landscaping business offering after-dark wellness packages for select clients. Guess who? I even found an old note from Serena tucked behind one of our cookbooks. It said, "I feel like I'm dying in here. He's too nice, too quiet. I need oxygen." I was too nice, too quiet. So I started recording. Not audio, but moments. I stopped answering her mother's calls. I skipped the Sunday brunches with friends who always sided with her. I let the plants die. I didn't refill the Brita. And I took one more step, something Serena never expected. I listed the house, quietly, legally, without drama. And when she finally came back a week later, smiling like nothing happened and saying, "Let's not make this bigger than it is," she walked through the front door and stopped cold. Because the furniture was gone. The walls were bare. The floor echoed under her designer boots, and taped to the kitchen counter was a single envelope. Her name, my handwriting. Inside, just 3 words, "This was ours." She collapsed right there on the hardwood we picked out together. But I didn't watch her fall. I wasn't there. I was already gone. The hardest part wasn't listing the house. It wasn't even driving away with the last box in the trunk. Passing neighbors who waved without knowing they'd never see me again. No, the hardest part was silence. Not hers, mine. Silence is heavy. You can carry it for years without noticing. But the moment you set it down, the noise of truth becomes deafening. After I walked away, I didn't tell anyone. Not my brother, not my best friend from college, not even my boss. I just ghosted the life I had shared with Serena. Vanished. I needed a place where she couldn't reach me. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Every inch of me had been wrapped around her like ivy on an old house, and I had to rip myself free, brick by brick. I stayed at a small seasonal rental in the Ozarks. It wasn't glamorous. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors close enough to knock, just me and a wood stove that smoked too much. The kind of place where your phone loses signal and you start to remember what your own voice sounds like. That isolation didn't feel like punishment. Felt like permission to breathe, to think, to unravel. And unravel I did. At night, I lay on a lumpy mattress under a thin quilt, replaying every conversation Serena and I ever had that I brushed off as weird. Every glance she gave her phone and smiled. Every stretch of silence in the car. Every time she said, "Caleb's wife doesn't appreciate him." I used to think she was just observant. Turns out she was warning me. But my time in that cabin wasn't just for wallowing. I was digging into who she really was when she thought no one was watching. You see, Serena wasn't just cheating on me physically or emotionally. She was leveraging me. I didn't realize it until I checked our joint savings account and saw she'd temporarily moved $12,800 into her personal account without a word. Labeled it retreat funds. I tracked every transfer. I followed every breadcrumb. And the trail didn't just lead to Caleb. There was another name, Jordana. She was Serena's business partner, or so I was told. But emails between them told another story. They weren't co-running retreats. They were running games. Workshops with no clients, refund policies that led nowhere, Instagram giveaways for trips that never existed. Serena was using her platform as a healer to pull in trust and flip it into cash. It hit me one morning, a rainy, gray blur of a morning, that I hadn't just lost a marriage. I'd been part of something rotten. She wasn't a woman in search of freedom. She was a woman who mistook manipulation for growth. And I'd been her silent investor. That realization stung worse than any affair. I remember standing barefoot outside the cabin, watching my breath in the cold air, wondering how many other people she'd done this to, how many Calebs were really just marks along the way. And the truth landed like a brick. I wasn't even special enough to be betrayed with passion. I was convenient. That's what finally snapped something in me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was aware. And awareness is the start of power. I took action. I contacted an attorney who specialized in marital asset recovery. Not just divorce, financial justice. The guy's name was Doyle Rhymes, a pit bull in corduroy. He didn't flinch when I told him everything. In fact, he said, "You're about the fourth guy this month with a soulful entrepreneur wife bleeding him dry." Together, we started mapping a quiet, legal counteroffensive. Serena had no idea. She was still off with Caleb, probably reading tarot cards and calling it therapy, while I was compiling documentation for a case that would freeze the account she thought she'd emptied so safely. Her comeback plan, crushed before she even returned. But I wasn't done. Because one night, a message came through from a number I didn't recognize. Just 3 words. "Coming home tomorrow." No punctuation, no apology. That was the moment I decided to leave something behind. A message. Not angry, not loud, just final. The house she would step into wouldn't be the one she left. The kitchen would be gutted. The walls stripped. The bedroom empty, save for one envelope and something she never expected to see again. And when she walked through that door, her boots echoing on bare floors, expecting warmth or forgiveness or a quiet husband waiting, she saw it all. And she collapsed right there. But not from grief, from fear. Because what I'd done wasn't about revenge. It was about letting her see, for the first time, the exact size of the emptiness she'd created, and realizing it belonged to her now. All of it. Serena always thought she was the one holding the pen, the author of our story, the one who set the rhythm and tone. And maybe for a long time she was. I had let her write chapters where I was the passive character, the side note, the man who stayed in the background while she bloomed. But the moment she walked out and handed me that absurd line, "This little thing can't ruin us," I realized something. I was no longer in her book. I had started writing my own. The envelope I left wasn't dramatic. No drawn-out letter, no accusations. Just one typed page on heavy paper, the kind you'd use for wedding vows or legal notices. At the top, a simple title, Inventory of Our Truth. Below it, line by line, were details. The date she first stayed overnight at Caleb's, recorded by the Nest camera she forgot I had linked to my phone. The $12,800 in unauthorized transfers. The forged signature on a withdrawal slip I'd reported but never questioned until now. The guest speaker booking for her retreat in Asheville, which never happened, but which billed 6 attendees over $1,200 each. And most damning of all, a notarized declaration from her own assistant, who quietly sent me screenshots showing that Serena planned her space with Caleb months before she ever confessed. At the bottom of the page was a short message. Not angry, just exact. I loved you through your lies. Now I love myself through your silence. No threats, no insults, no begging. I didn't need her reaction, but I still saw it. Thanks to the camera I left active, hidden in the hallway smoke detector. It wasn't revenge. It was closure. Closure in real time. She entered the house with a duffel bag and a smile that said, "I'm back. Everything's going to be fine." But the second she saw the stripped-down room, the blank shelves, and the white envelope taped dead center on the kitchen counter, that smile died fast. She opened it. She read every word. And then her knees buckled. Literally. She leaned against the fridge, breathing fast, eyes wide. Panic. Not guilt, not sadness. Fear. Then came the phone calls. First to me. I let it ring. Then to my brother. Then to Caleb. That one went to voicemail, too. Finally, she tried Jordana. That one connected. I didn't hear what was said, but Serena's voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. And when she finally sat down on the floor, she pulled her knees to her chest like a child hiding from thunder. That's when I knew I'd done the right thing. Not because she was suffering, but because she was finally seeing the truth without filters, without her mirrors, without the spiritual fluff she used to cover everything she didn't want to face. Meanwhile, I wasn't far. I watched the whole thing from a borrowed cabin about 15 minutes outside the city. Close enough to handle logistics, far enough to be untouchable. I drank coffee from a chipped mug and waited for my attorney's confirmation. Court filing submitted. Financial fraud included. Request for emergency injunction on her assets. Approved. Doyle moved fast. That was his thing. The man could dismantle a dishonest marriage with the calm precision of a surgeon. And in our state, joint finances meant joint responsibility and traceable consequences. She had no idea that the spa retreat she was planning for next month was frozen. The brand partnership she had coming up was canceled. Her LLC was now under legal audit. And that New Age Sacred Healing Journal she was publishing? Amazon removed the pre-order listing within hours due to reported identity violations from plagiarized submissions, courtesy of an anonymous tip with evidence. I didn't lift a finger. I just handed over the truth, and the truth did what I couldn't. Now, here's the wildest part. The next day, Serena tried to reach out again. This time, not through a call. She came to the cabin. How she found it, I still don't know. Maybe someone talked. Maybe she followed me once and saved the location. I was standing on the deck sipping coffee when I saw her car crawl up the gravel path like it was afraid to wake the trees. She stepped out wearing that same hoodie she took from me the day she left. No makeup, no yoga glow, just a pale face and trembling fingers. "Julian," she said. Her voice cracked. "Please, we need to talk." But we didn't, because for the first time in our lives, I wasn't the one who needed to explain anything. I just looked at her, nodded once and said, "You brought this page to life. You don't get to rewrite it." She stood there for a second, shocked, maybe, like she expected me to crumble, to hug her, to pretend none of this happened. And when I didn't, she turned back toward the car. But before she got in, she whispered something under her breath, something that still rings in my ears. "I never thought you had it in you." I didn't answer, but inside I thought, neither did I. The strangest part of watching someone unravel is realizing they were never whole to begin with. Serena had spent so long curating an image of harmony, balance, and femininity, all wrapped in spiritual self-help buzzwords and soft Instagram posts, that she forgot to be a real person. That hit me the night after she showed up at the cabin. She never called again. Not that day, not the next. She disappeared. But unlike last time, I didn't wonder where she went, because I already knew. She wasn't with Caleb anymore. I confirmed it through a mutual friend who still followed them both on social media. Turns out their little spiritual connection cracked under pressure. According to screenshots that landed in my inbox, Caleb had learned about the financial audit and flipped, blocked her, ghosted her, and reportedly left town to deal with some stuff. I almost laughed. So now Serena was alone. No lover, no support system, no brand. And her last remaining asset, our home, was days away from being handed over to a court-appointed receiver. It was poetic, really. Not revenge, just math. Subtraction. Actions have consequences. Still, as much as I told myself I was done feeling anything, I wasn't. Not entirely. Late that night, I sat at the edge of the cabin bed, phone in one hand, a cold cup of tea in the other, scrolling through old photos. Not to torture myself. I wasn't looking for what we had. I was looking for signs I missed. In every image where we were smiling, there was always a shadow. The tilt of her body away from mine, the half-step she kept between us, her phone always slightly out of view. We say hindsight is 20/20ths, but really it's a microscope. I saw everything now. Around 2 a.m., I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Just one line. "You really destroyed me, Julian." I stared at it for a long time. Then another followed. All for what? Ego? Image? Did you ever love me at all? That one made me sit up. The projection was stunning. She wanted me to carry the weight of her collapse, as if I'd handed her the matches and told her to burn the house down. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I called Doyle first thing in the morning. I told him, "She's cracking. I think she's going to make a move." He didn't ask questions, just said, "Then we stay ahead of it." He filed for a temporary restraining order to prevent any asset tampering and pushed our court date forward. And just as predicted, the next day, Serena broke in. She used the back door. I changed the front locks but apparently forgot the tiny side entry that led into the garage. I only found out because the agent I hired to list the house called me in a panic. "Julian, someone's in the house. A woman. She's screaming." She knocked down a lamp. Police were called. No charges pressed yet, but it was enough to ensure that she'd have to explain herself, in writing in front of a judge. She left behind a notebook, one of her manifestation journals. Out of pure curiosity, I opened it. Inside, instead of affirmations or meditations, I found pages of frantic, scrawled thoughts. Some were incoherent. Others were confessions, regrets, lists of people she'd used, names I didn't recognize, amounts of money. Then, halfway through, a line that made me pause. I thought I could rewrite reality. I didn't think he'd ever leave. There it was. The truth, raw and unfiltered. She believed in the fantasy more than the marriage, believed she could walk away and return to something frozen in time. A man waiting, unchanged, obedient. But I had changed. Slowly, quietly, irreversibly. And so had the life I was building. A few days later, I signed the papers on a new space, a small loft downtown. Nothing flashy, but mine. No shadows. I furnished it sparsely, just what I needed. On the wall above my desk, I hung the page I'd left her in the house. Inventory of our truth. Not out of spite, but as a reminder. Silence is not the same as weakness. And then I got an unexpected letter. Not from Serena, from Jordana. Typed, professional, apologetic. She wrote that she was deeply sorry for her role in recent events, that she had been misled by Serena's narrative, and that she wanted to cooperate with any ongoing legal matters. Attached was a PDF. All communications, bank transfers, and deleted messages she'd archived, just in case. With one email, the case turned. And so did something inside me. Because as I opened that file and saw my name mentioned over and over again, always as a tool, a resource, never as a person, I didn't feel pain anymore. I felt peace. Because Serena's return wasn't the climax. It was just the moment she realized she'd left me behind. But I was never going back. Healing isn't poetic. It's not candles and closure and some dramatic sunrise after pain. It's slow, repetitive, and mostly invisible. Most days feel the same. But one morning you realize you haven't thought about them for hours. Then a full day. Then you hear their name and you don't flinch. That's the real miracle. After Jordana's letter, everything moved faster than I expected. Her confession, written, detailed, and with time-stamped attachments, was a legal wrecking ball. Doyle said it best. She just handed you the spine of the case. That one document allowed us to pivot the strategy from purely financial defense to fraudulent misrepresentation, which meant that Serena's personal liability just tripled. I didn't even know what that meant at first. I had to Google it 3 times. But what mattered was this. Everything she tried to take from me, money, peace, reputation, was now shifting in the opposite direction. But strangely, none of it felt like winning. It felt like closing a door I had been holding open for too long. Because by then, I was already working on something new. I started journaling again. Not in the way Serena did, not for the curated highlight reel. I wrote honestly about the collapse, the betrayals, and the ways I contributed too. I didn't want to become a victim. I wanted to become clear. And clarity, I learned, is violent. Tears away illusions you didn't even know you were clinging to. I realized I had made Serena the center of my identity for over a decade. Not just as a wife, but as a lighthouse. I let her mood steer my course. If she was calm, I felt okay. If she was cold, I questioned myself. And somewhere along the way, I started mistaking peace for passivity. That was over. I started going to a tiny boxing gym not far from my loft. Nothing serious. Just movement, grit, real people who didn't care about my backstory or my divorce. I didn't even tell them my name at first. They just called me Tall Guy. And then one day I got a call from my former college professor, a guy I hadn't spoken to in years. He'd heard through someone that I was freelancing again and asked if I wanted to help restructure the design curriculum for an online course platform. I said yes. That same week, I signed my first solo contract. I wasn't just rebuilding. I was reinventing. Meanwhile, Serena had gone quiet, publicly at least. Her social accounts vanished. Her podcast episodes were pulled. Her coaching collective was now listed as on indefinite hiatus. Her name was removed from 3 brand partnerships. One of them even publicly stated they'd been misled about her credentials and had zero tolerance for deceptive conduct. It wasn't me. I didn't push any of it. I didn't need to. Her lies were unraveling by themselves, thread by thread. But that didn't stop her from trying one more time. Came 2 weeks after the legal hearing was scheduled. She sent me a handwritten letter. Not a text, not an email, an actual letter in a floral envelope, as if she was still curating aesthetics. Inside were 6 pages. 6 pages of dense handwriting, looped, anxious, almost frantic in places. She wrote about how lost she was, how everything got out of hand. She talked about Caleb, how he wasn't what I thought, and how she never felt safe with him. She mentioned her business collapse, her friends leaving, the silence that followed. But what stood out most wasn't what she wrote. It was what she asked. Can we go back to who we were before it broke? That sentence hit me. Not because I considered it, not because I still wanted her, but because it revealed the deepest truth. She still didn't get it. There was no version of us that hadn't already been cracked. The illusion of safety, the performance of loyalty, all of it had been built on her ability to rewrite the truth in real time, to convince both of us that a broken frame could hold weight. But I had seen the fracture. I had lived it. And no amount of nostalgia or poetic handwriting could undo that. I didn't respond, not with words. Instead, I filed the letter away. Not to use against her, not to document anything, but as a personal record of the final moment she tried to rewrite the ending. Because I had already written mine. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. But it was real. And this time, it was mine. There's something surreal about watching someone try to return to a version of reality that no longer exists. It's like watching an actor step onto a stage after the play has ended. The lights are down, The audience is gone, and still they perform. That's what Serena's letter felt like. Like she was performing for a version of me that hadn't survived the wreckage. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, I was done with punishment, but because there was nothing left to say that didn't belong to the past. And as I folded her letter and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, something inside me quietly sealed shut. In the days that followed, my world grew quieter and cleaner. I was no longer holding space for her emotions, her chaos, her noise. And into that silence came something unexpected. People. Not all at once, and not the ones I expected, but real people who saw me for who I was now, not who I used to be when I was orbiting around Serena's gravity. One of them was Rachel. She was a barista at the little cafe across from the gym. I'd seen her dozens of times, always scribbling in a notebook during her breaks, always humming whatever song was playing. She had nothing to do with my past and everything to do with the present I was trying to understand. We didn't jump into anything dramatic. We started with long conversations about books, coffee, the absurdity of online dating. It felt easy, like walking barefoot after wearing tight shoes for too long. She never asked about my divorce. She just let me exist. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to be accepted. Meanwhile, Serena was unraveling in ways I hadn't anticipated. One of her former clients, a woman named Lynn, contacted me through Doyle's office. She had booked 2 back-to-back retreats through Serena's coaching company and had never received a refund or a clear answer about what happened. When she finally demanded accountability, Serena allegedly blocked her. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2. Serena had used my name, my business credentials, as part of the promotional pitch. I had never given permission, never even knew it happened. But there it was in black and white, designed in collaboration with Julian Ward, creative strategist. When Doyle saw it, he smiled grimly. "Now it's personal," he said. We added another layer to the case. Unauthorized use of identity for commercial gain. I didn't even have to testify. Just signed a statement and let Doyle do the rest. But the emotional weight of it hit differently. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about how deeply Serena had woven me into her web without my knowledge, how I'd been used to validate something I never believed in. Around this time, my mother called. She'd been quiet through the whole process, supportive but cautious. She'd never liked Serena, but she was never the kind to say, "I told you so." This time, though, her voice was different, worried. "I heard from someone at church," she said. "Serena's been trying to speak to people about you. She's saying you left her destitute, that you sabotaged her life." It was like a punch I didn't see coming. Not because I cared what Serena thought, but because of how desperate it sounded. The same woman who left with calm confidence, who stood at my kitchen counter and said, "Don't be dramatic," was now painting herself as the abandoned victim in a story she authored. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't post anything. But I did something better. I held a conversation, a private one, with Lynn, with Jordana, and with 2 other women who came forward after the legal filings became public record. Each had been drawn into Serena's universe, promised healing and high-vibration business alignment, and left with nothing but drained accounts and rehearsed apologies. We created a quiet network. No lawsuits, no revenge. Just the truth, organized and recorded. Lynn eventually started a blog to document her story, and while she never named Serena directly, the message was clear. Enough is enough. And through all of it, I stayed still, present, calm. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I'd finally remembered who I was before her. Before the performances, before the manipulation dressed as enlightenment, before I spent every day wondering if I was being loved or used. And slowly, the version of me that she thought she could erase came back, not as a reaction, but as a man rebuilding. One night, sitting on my balcony with Rachel next to me, she asked, "Do you think she ever really loved you?" I didn't hesitate. "I think she loved being adored," I said. "And I was really good at adoring her." Rachel didn't flinch. She nodded, took a sip of her tea, and said nothing. And that silence, that kind silence, said more than Serena's 6 pages ever could. Because the truth had finally found a place to rest. Not in confrontation, not in court, but in peace. In the weeks that followed, it was like watching the final few pieces of a slow collapse fall into place. Not with an explosion, not with rage, but with a kind of sad, almost pathetic quietness. Serena had weaponized silence when it suited her, used it to manipulate, to guilt, to make others chase her approval. But now that silence had turned on her. It wasn't a strategy anymore. It was an echo chamber. I didn't see her again, but I heard about her through whispers, emails, quiet calls from people who had once praised her and now felt burned by the image they'd bought into. She had tried to return to her old online platforms, even created a new name, Serenity S, a rebrand. I almost respected the desperation it took to reinvent herself after so much public unraveling. But you can't rebrand character. And this time, the story followed her. You see people talk, especially people who've been hurt. And when the carefully edited version of Serena started resurfacing, new site, new coaching packages, new promises, the women she misled began speaking. Not as a mob, but as a wave. Patient, measured, clear. Lynn's blog went viral after a parenting site picked it up. Jordana did a podcast episode explaining her role in Serena's business, why she walked away, and why she gave me the documents. And just like that, the truth moved without me. I didn't push it. I didn't have to. By now, I had let go of the idea that I needed closure through confrontation. Closure, I'd learned, wasn't a moment. It was a pattern. A new rhythm of living that no longer included her shadow in every thought. And that rhythm had become my daily life. The loft had turned into a real home. Rachel painted one of the walls with a mural, a huge abstract wave made of lines and shapes. It was something, she said, that represented motion without chaos. I loved it immediately. We didn't label whatever we were. There was no need. It wasn't about escape. It was about company that didn't drain you. But one thing kept nagging at me. My name. Not legally, emotionally. I had become so tied to being Julian, the quiet husband, Julian, the betrayed, Julian, the guy whose wife imploded publicly, that I forgot I had ever been more than the role she cast me in. So I started doing something small. I reclaimed my name. I updated my website, created new branding for my freelance work. I started signing my designs with a new mark, just a minimalist JW in the bottom corner. Something clean and personal. My inbox started to fill. Small clients at first, then a few bigger ones. One company offered to fly me to Portland for a design retreat. I declined. I didn't need the spectacle. I just needed the flow, the quiet, steady flow of something finally being mine again. Then came the final letter. It arrived unexpectedly. A real envelope, but this one wasn't from Serena. It was from her father. We hadn't spoken in years. He never interfered in our marriage, though I knew he disapproved of her life coaching journey. Inside the envelope was a single card, handwritten, brief, and direct. Julian, I know this is strange, but I wanted to tell you I've been following everything quietly. I'm sorry for what she did, for what it cost you, for not saying anything when I knew better. You were good to her, better than she ever admitted. You deserved more. If there's anything I can do to help, I will. Ronald. It hit me harder than anything Serena ever said. Maybe because it came from someone who saw the truth, who had seen it long before I had and said nothing, and was finally admitting it. That night, I sat on the floor of my loft holding that card and realized something. I wasn't grieving her anymore. I was grieving who I had to become in order to survive her. And that was the final layer to peel away. So I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, just a clean, final step. I took everything, the court filings, the emails, the screenshots, the letters, and placed them in a sealed box. I wrote "closed" across the front and slid it into the back of my closet. Not because I was in denial, but because it didn't belong in my daily life anymore. It was part of my past, and my past wasn't my prison. The next morning, I met Rachel at the cafe. We sat at our usual table near the window. I didn't tell her about the letter. I didn't need to. She looked at me and smiled in that way that people smile when they see you breathing differently. Lighter. You seem quiet today, she said. I nodded. I think that's the point. And then we just sat. No lessons, no drama, just sunlight through the glass and peace. I didn't have to explain. 6 months passed. Not rushed, not blurred, just quietly unfolded like a book I didn't think I'd ever get to finish reading. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually living my life, not reacting to someone else's, not trying to hold things together that had long since fallen apart. I was sleeping better, working better, laughing at things without analyzing why. That's when you know you've healed. Not when the pain vanishes, but when it no longer defines the shape of your day. Serena was no longer a ghost in my world. She became what she always should have been, a closed chapter. Not forgotten, just complete. I didn't wonder what she was doing, where she was, who she was trying to be now. I genuinely didn't care. And it wasn't cold. It was clean. The kind of detachment that comes with peace, not spite. The legal proceedings were finalized in early spring. The judge ruled in our favor. Restitution was ordered. Nothing extravagant, but enough to make a point, enough to make it clear that what she did had consequences. She didn't appear in court that final day. Sent her lawyer instead. That felt fitting. She couldn't even face the story she wrote to the end. After the hearing, I walked out into the warm afternoon air. Doyle clapped me on the back. "You're free," he said simply. And I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, just breathing, watching people go by, feeling sunlight on my face. No grand celebrations, no revenge speeches, no dramatic declarations. Just a man who survived what should have broken him and didn't. Rachel met me later that evening. She brought me a small cake, chocolate, my favorite, and a card that read, "To endings that make space for beginnings." We didn't toast. We didn't even talk much about the case. We just sat on my balcony, feet up on the railing, watching the city soften into dusk. Her hand found mine halfway through the silence. No tension, no weight. I didn't know what we were. I didn't need to. We were something better than labels. We were safe. And when you've spent years being manipulated, gaslit, erased, that kind of safety is everything. 1 week later, I took a walk through the neighborhood where I used to live with Serena. I hadn't been back since the day I left. The house had already been sold. New owners, fresh paint, unfamiliar cars in the driveway. I didn't stop, didn't stare. I just walked past slowly and let myself feel nothing. Because that's what healing does. It replaces reaction with release. On my way home, I passed a small bookstore and saw something in the window, a framed quote on a weathered sign. "You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that survived them." I smiled. Because that version, the one who clung to peace to keep from drowning, who confused patience with self-sacrifice, that man was gone. And the one who stood in his place, he didn't wait for closure. He created it. Back at the loft, I opened my laptop and looked at the blank page of a new design project I had put off for weeks. Then, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel stuck. I didn't hear her voice in my head questioning me, doubting me, shrinking me. I just began. Line by line, shape by shape. A life that finally belonged to me. And this time I was the only author.